Hey everyone, this is Kelly Tracht coming to you with a little cloud painting. I just got back from Sanibel Island that I got to visit for my birthday, and I spent a lot of my time photographing the island and all the views that I possibly could. And this is a little vignette of Pine Island Sound, which is an absolutely beautiful body of water in between Sanibel Island and the mainland of Florida, which would lead to Fort Myers on that side. So right now I'm just putting in some lines with a very simple sketch and establishing the horizon line and some shoreline area down here, and keeping it very loose, thinking about where I want my lines to go to bring the eye into the painting. I have a Caran set of gouache pan paints that I'm using today just for something quick. So I would call this a watercolor sketch, even though it's technically gouache. I will use some opaque whites at the end, but I'm painting kind of in a watercolor style, and I'm painting on a watercolor paper. I don't know the brand, but it's probably about a 300 GSM thickness, which is about 140 pound. So I just established the underside of the cloud formation at this very gentle angle to just try to give some perspective to the landscape, meaning that it'll just pull the eye in a little bit. Now I'm putting in some of the darks in the clouds, trying to find a nice gray. I'm a colorist, so my clouds are going to have chroma. They're going to have a lot of color. I love to pick out as much color in any subject I'm painting as possible. And that's just how I like to see things, or how I do see things. And it gets me excited to paint because I start to see colors and things that I want to paint, you know. So right now I'm mixing up, I'm changing between cool grays and warm grays. So right now this is one of my darkest values in the painting. That's how I'll start, even though typically watercolor you start light to dark. I'm painting more direct. Like I said, this is technically gouache, which is an opaque medium, as watercolor is a transparent medium. So you typically paint light to dark with watercolor and dark to light with the opaque mediums like oil and gouache and acrylic. So I just wanted to lay that down to begin with, to let you know that normally with a watercolor you would just wash large areas with a wash brush, but here I'm going to go in and start on the small little areas of a darker grays and violets and blues that are in the cloud formation up above the horizon line. So warming up the mixture there with some yellow and just coming in with like a warm gray using the white. And here I'm using a mixing white, which is a little bit more translucent than a permanent white or a titanium white, which I'll use at the end for highlights. So majority of the video I'm using a mixing white. And there I just warmed it up, the mixture, with some orange and red and yellow. It's still considered a gray, so these are chromatic grays. And again, I just like to play with the colors of them. I could do an endless amount of gray on this cloud formation. The idea is to think in terms of values, but then use the chroma or the color to make it interesting and playful, or kind of sparkling, so to speak. I like to lay warm grays next to cool grays and vice versa. Edges are huge on clouds, meaning that the cloud appears solid as we know they're not. So you have to finesse it with the edges. And right now it just looks like a bunch of shapes on there, but I'm going to bring it all together, as I develop this. So I'm going to just establish the top of the clouds. The edge of the clouds is very charming and kind of scalloped. And I want to capture some of it without it looking plastic or hard around the edges. And so again, a little finesse there. And I'll just keep lightening up that mixture and warming it up. Cool versus warm, warm versus cool. These are the fundamentals and the devices of painting that can be used. And you can develop your own likes or dislikes or what you focus on. Again, just another little scalloped edge on the cloud. Putting dark behind the cloud here, as I'm doing with the blue sky, really just popped that white shape using the white of the paper. So I will use any tool available to create a three-dimensional form on a two-dimensional surface. And so I just put some more grays in here. Again, everything I've put down is almost a gray, if not an absolute gray. The sky, I did add a little teeny bit of a complement to the blue, so that would be orange. And just to take the edge off of the candy coloredness of it. So I'm bringing in some orange because I can feel the warmth of the sun to the left of the painting. And so I want to find a way to express that. And I can see some warm and yellow in the reference photo, which shows the sun to the left of the scene. The image or the subject matter, if it's being having the sun shine on it, the closest edge to the sun can be the warmest side of it. And that's another good way to express light in the paintings. I like to paint some little more glowy cloud over there. Warm cloud versus a blue sky or a cool sky. Mixing up some more grays. You can kind of get what's already on your palette. You kind of pick it up on there with this gouache, because you can reignite it. I know that's not the right word. I can't think of the word right now. The gouache is able to be reignited, unlike acrylic. So again, this is just a very loose little sketch. It's only a 5x7. Got back from my trip and I was going through my photos, and I want to start in immediately on the paintings that, or the photos that speak to me, or that maybe I have a memory of while I was on my trip. And so I can do these fast little sketches in like a half hour, and it's very, very gratifying. I like this kind of subject. Of a place that you've been and you had a nice time there. So I'm establishing a horizon line, and I mixed up a pretty gray marine blue with some phthalo blue and some orange and maybe a little white, just to gray it down a little bit, because I want the horizon line to lay down a little bit, meaning that I don't want it to be harsh. I'm going to come in later and put some distant land back there, and kind of change it up a little bit. I didn't want it to make it look like open water because Pine Island Sound is a contained body of water. So I added some distant shoreline with some palms and just little gestural things that made it look like trees and buildings maybe over on the other side of the water. So as the water gradates down from the sky, it's getting closer to you, the viewer. It's going to get lighter, warmer, and appear a little bit more shallow. So it won't be as dark blue. And then the shoreline, I don't want it to be flat. I want it to have some shape to it. So I have a little dip kind of just to bring the eye in and give it, again, some interest in there. These little gestures can really help with that on such a teeny little painting. I normally don't paint this small, but I do really, really think it's helpful. I took I think a sap green and some red, and I made it like a grayed down dark green for the right side of the foliage on the shore, the shrubbery, and then lightened the mixture up with some yellow as I went to the left to, again, bring in a little bit of the warmth of the sun off to the left side. I switched up my brush to a little larger. It's a flat now. I was just using the kit brush that came with a Caran set, and now I'm using a silver brush that would just be a little looser for me. I don't want to get too tedious with all the little shapes in the clouds because then it'll look like a bunch of objects up there. I want it to start to come together as unified, but maintaining the color play. So larger brush now, and continuing with mixing up chromatic grays, which are mixed up by playing with complements. So orange and blue and purple and yellow and green and pink and that kind of thing with some white. Instead of just getting out a tube of black and white paint and mixing up gray, I'm mixing what are called chromatic grays. And as a colorist, that's what works for me. And I'm just trying to find the form in the clouds, and again, sort of soften up all the little shapes I put down before with the round brush. So I can go back and forth on these little areas multiple times, and always trying to stay true to value, and while at the same time playing with color. So if it's a warm, light yellow, a cool yellow with some white, and again, as I try to get the clouds to look a little more punchy white, I'll pull out the titanium white gouache instead of the mixing white. White always cools down a mixture. So if you're trying to get something to appear sunlit or golden, you have to think of that while you're, doing it, because it'll take down that golden color. So that's why you kind of exaggerate it with the yellow and the orange a little bit in the white. It was a relief to move to a larger brush here because the smaller round brush can make you get real tight, and I like to paint loose. The bigger the brush, the looser you'll paint, and having a flat brush helps with edges. And what I mean by that is you can make nice soft and lost edges with a flat brush. And that's the trick with clouds, because like I said, we know they're not solid, even though they appear to have a solid three-dimensional form. We also know that it's water vapor, and so it should have an ephemeral feel to it. It should have some lightness to it and fluffiness to it. I put in a little bit of a magenta. I love to play with that and put in a little color anywhere I can. The longer you work on a piece, for me, I see more colors as I go. That's why I don't work in usually big areas at once. I like to work in spots. So I mixed up some more of that warm dark green, and it's almost a black value. It's like a charcoal gray value. So that'll be the darkest value in the painting. It'll be in the foreground, and there's a little more contrast there. So now I'm coming in just with some gestural reed shapes using the fine point of my flat brush, the edge I should say, and then we'll come in some more reed shapes with like a little darker green over the lighter green, and start to create a little depth and language there of what that is. It's like a natural shoreline, unmanicured, so it's kind of wild. The edge of the flat brush works great for these little reflections I'm putting on the body of water now, and I just got a little lighter blue to just make some little ripples or reflections, and then I'm trying to bring in some white reflections of the clouds, but it's not white, it's gray. I'm using another chromatic gray. Probably the trickiest thing about using gouache is how it dries so much lighter than, or dark, lighter than when it's wet, where acrylic dries darker. So you have to get familiar with your paints and practice with them so that you know the color shift that's going to happen and the value shift that will happen too. Because that is a thing with gouache. Gouache is very convenient because it's easy to clean up, and it's a real quick medium to pull out of your drawer and use. It's very spontaneous, and the opacity of some of the pigments is just great because you can, like I said, paint in the way of acrylic or oil, dark to light. So what I did was I got kind of the clouds to a point of finality. They're not done, but I got to a point where I thought, okay, now I need to focus on something else in the painting. I'll come back to the clouds one more time, because I believe in this painting that is the real subject of the painting are the clouds. And so they can merit quite a lot of attention and time. But the other elements are really important too, and there's a lot of opportunity in them. to really nail it, to really, you know, create that sense of place of Pine Island Sound. Try to recreate the feeling of the place. I'm in no way doing anything literal or documenting the place like a photograph, but I'm trying to express the feeling of the nature, the light, and the even things like you could feel the warmth of the day, the afternoon, or the nature there, without it being what they call a slavish copy of a photograph. So I'm going back. I worked a little bit on the lower part of the painting, and now I'm ready to tackle the clouds again. So I'm bringing in some more gray, chromatic grays, try to soften things and refine things a little bit. Like I said, to me, the key with clouds is to keep them three-dimensional but soft. Keep them with grays but give them color. So I'm going back to the horizon line, and I think it's then when I decided to add the distant shore, which wasn't in my photo that I was using, so to speak, but it was in my mind because I had spent some time there, and so I got a picture in my mind and memory. Memory is a very valid source of your subject matter. And since it was fresh in my memory, I thought, let's create something more accurate to what I experienced when I was there. I would put a little more white out on my palette and tackle some of the really punchy parts of the cloud. White is a way to really express parts of the painting that you want to really dominate or be clean, so to speak, clean color. You can come back over with an opaque white at the end and reestablish the real bright parts of the painting. So that's what I'm doing right now, and using almost pure white every time. There's a little bit of color I'm mixing in with it, but I will get into some areas where I do some heavier layer impasto white here. And there's always a lot more ways to accomplish these things. But this is how I like to do it. And I like to paint in what I call spot painting. It's just how I see my subject. So I'm coming in with spots of color. And the trick is to just marry it all together so that it doesn't read as busy or chaotic. And that requires getting the right values and the right chroma and the right edges. Now, this painting is not going to be a highly resolved painting, realist painting. It's just a sketch. So this could go further and further. I don't like tedious, so I'm not going to come in with teeny little brushes and make it look photorealistic. That's not how I like to do it. So this will get to a level of finish for me that I'll be happy with. And if I love it, I'll go larger, and then I can refine it a lot better without it becoming tedious, because tedious is not my thing. I'm just trying to create a little more character on these clouds. the Florida clouds have a real specific look to me. And so I like to be authentic about what I'm painting. And so I want to, you know, communicate that these are Florida clouds. And if you're familiar with Florida clouds, you may notice that they are unique a lot of times. So I want to come in and do and do a darker wash on the sky. It'll help punch that cloud even more. And it's okay if the underlayers show through. This is just a loose sketch. It's expressive, it's spontaneous, and I love it like that. And I know people respond to spontaneity in art. You can feel kind of the weight of the cloud without it feeling like it's plastic. It has substance, but it's vapor. I just put some more white down on my palette. I could come back, like I said, and play with these clouds over and over and over. And now I'm just going to come in and bring a little bit of life and sparkle to the brush in the front. And what I'm doing by that is I mixed up a little bit of a pink with the magenta and the white, and the opacity of the gouache allow me to lay down some gestural reed looking growy things there. Give it a little bit of sparkle. And here's where I decided to put in some land, because I feel like it wasn't giving me that Pine Island feeling, Pine Island sound rather. It needed some distant shore line that looked like you might be able to get there if you rode your kayak for like an hour or two. Not too far, not too close, creating this vast open body of water with this huge cloud. So I'm just kind of going off memory and trying to pull out elements of the photo that weren't easy to see because photos flatten everything. So it was fresh in my mind, and so I was using that memory. And I think just as you see with just a few gestures, it started to describe that place a lot more specifically with just a few rough moves of the brush over the paper. I'm just trying to create a little distance and bringing in some warmer highlights, because on the left side we'll have the sun hitting the greenery over there, and so you can really bring in some light goldy greens over there on the left. Trying to create some more depth on the water, the body of water, by dark against light, light against dark. Trying to make it feel like the cloud is up there. You know, we know that water is a mirror. It's very flat, reflects what's above it. Keep pulling out some more white. The white comes in tubes, so pull out a little at a time because it dries fast on my palette. And I think I'm just mixing up some more specific colors to try to create a boat that I decided to put in here, a center console fishing style boat, because it'll give it some scale and some human scale and some local color that is common to see around those parts. The engine I just pulled out. I usually don't use it, but I just came in and just used straight black. And then I tried to make the boat green, quickly realizing it wasn't going to read. My values weren't good, so I then lightened it up and just sort of suggested a white boat, which is, again, real common there. Won't stand out too much and also won't disappear. I don't want the boat to dominate the scene. Put a little seat on the boat and at a center console, and the side of the boat come in with just a few simple strokes. First, I tried to paint a figure on the bow of the boat and quickly realized it didn't work. It wasn't scaled right. But this is my attempt to put a figure on the bow, and decided that was distracting from the scene. So away it goes. So I decided to put a dark figure seated. And here we're going to put a line underneath the boat to just give it that feeling that it's floating on the water, to anchor it a little bit through a shadow. And then I'm just trying to put in a couple of cabbage palms, which are the native palm there. So I think they convey a feeling of nature. And I'll just put my initials here. I went ahead and tweaked the clouds one more time, but this was about the extent of this piece. And I called it Colorful Clouds over Pine Island Sound. I've been painting in Florida for my whole life, and I own a gallery in Jupiter, Florida with my husband, and I do art shows in Florida. So please follow me, subscribe and like, and drop a comment or a question. I really appreciate you watching this.